Hello, it's Brother Gerald, YouTube philosopher, and today I have a comment that pretty much is reminiscent of what I've mentioned in other videos before. We have this conflict between women and men, and me being a black man seems to have taken on a new color in that our situation as black people is very unique. Black women and black men, we come from a history of being exploited, being in bondage, and it seems like now we're being exploited even more so despite our supposed liberation and freedom. And I would just like to say that there is no such thing as two different things being equal or the same. To be different assumes inequality. The acceptance of this lie by the women has resulted in women being exploited and suffering loss. And this is what is consistently taught in the Bible. Adam and Eve believed the lie of the serpent, which resulted in their getting put out of the garden and suffering the intimate relationship they enjoyed with God while living in the garden. That relationship died along with humanity having to experience literal death also. So is this what was presented in the Bible any different from the death and loss of marriage and family today? We think that because of possessing a college degree that women are wise, but they have become fools. And it becomes more obvious as they grow old alone. And this, to me, is the point that Jesus made when he was talking to Nicodemus. Nicodemus, if you look, I believe it's in John, the Gospel of John, chapter 1. Jesus is visited by Nicodemus, and Nicodemus is a leader in Israel. And he comes under the cover of darkness because he didn't really want people to know that a lot of what Jesus was teaching was resonating in his spirit. And so he goes to Jesus and he asks Jesus, he says, I know that you are a prophet sent of God, because no one could do the miracles that you do unless you be with God and be having been sent by God. And Jesus just jumps off into telling him, look, man, unless you're born again, you cannot see the kingdom of God. And Nicodemus basically says, well, wait a second. Must I crawl up in my mother's womb and come out again? You know, he didn't understand what Jesus was saying. And Jesus says that, no, you totally don't get it. He said, flesh begets flesh. And in order to be born of the Spirit, you must be born again. And he basically kind of chastised Nicodemus by basically saying this: Nicodemus, if I tell you of things that are in the natural world and you don't believe what I'm telling you, how in the world can you believe on spiritual things? And so Jesus was kind of in a very roundabout way getting Nicodemus to realize just how dumb his thinking was, in that here it was, Jesus spoke very plainly and clearly, yet here it was, he didn't understand. And when he demonstrated his ignorance by making the statement of going up into his mother's womb and coming out, to me that was a very ridiculous thing. But He literally took what Jesus said, and it was supposed to be a comparison between the physical world and what takes place in the spiritual world. So these are the things that we have to understand. We have to understand context, and we have to also understand that God will use the physical things of this world to demonstrate spiritual realities. And it's in that book of the Bible that you get a complete picture. And complete is perfect. To be complete means to be perfect. And the Bible gives us a perfect picture and a perfect understanding of what we need to get along with each other and how this world is put together. And if you don't believe me, that's your problem. That you don't believe when God says it is so, that it is so. Because this even goes back to the story of Genesis. God said, let there be light. And it was so. But here it is. You have the scientists saying, no, God did not create light. God did not create the sun and moon and the stars. But the funny thing is, when you read that story, the Bible clearly says, and God created the heavens and the earth. And it was so. God said, let the waters be separate from the dry land. And it was so. But here it is, like the serpent. You have these atheistic philosophies. You have all of these different religions competing with the truth of God. And we believe the lie, and as a result, we suffer loss. And this is what the Bible, it just teaches you from the very first story. If you don't believe what God says, you're going to suffer a loss. If you think and misunderstand what God says, you're going to suffer a loss. But thanks be to God, He didn't leave us orphans to figure these things out. He made it very clear. He sent messengers. He sent teachers, prophets. He sent His Son. He sent so many things for us to rely upon to clearly and accurately understand our purpose for being here, our purpose for others, and just the ultimate culmination of this thing we call life. So with that, I'm hoping that this video gets women to start to think clearly, and ultimately you won't be suffering the loss of a husband at, any point in your life. You won't have to live alone in your latter years. You won't have to be out here thinking that, as a older woman, that you just have to give up sex in order to keep a man's attention. Sex is definitely important, but I'm just really hoping you guys stop thinking that your vaginas are the key to making a relationship perfect and making the man happy. No, the man needs to be believed in and believed on. And you have to have faith that this man is going to love you, honor, and cherish you. And you have to be committed to that view, because if you're not going to be happy, and you're going to involve other people in trying to make you happy, which ultimately is going to create a situation where you will suffer loss. So with that, I hope this will get you guys to think clearly and get that blessing that God promises. And He promises blessings every day, as long as you trust and believe in what He's taught you from the beginning. And it's just amazing how most of my videos, we just can't seem to get out of Genesis. We just can't get past the basic foundation of life, because we've run off believing everything other than what God taught. So we can't even get into a situation where he can deliver us out of bondage like he delivered the Israelites, and they suffered loss. Many of them, they left, they wandered in the wilderness where they died. They never got to the promised land to enjoy the fulfillment of the promise that God had given them in taking that first step out of Egypt. So with that, I depart. Peace to you all.